Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. You know, Creation Magazine covers quite a large range of different topics relating to the origins debate, and especially the implications morally of what, when you believe a particular thing about where you came from, whether we were made in the image of God or whether we evolved from an animal ancestor, the difference that makes to our morality, what we feel about right and wrong, about the value of human life, and so on.
Or either whether we make our own morality, or whether there is already a morality that has been designated by God.
Yes,
where right and wrong comes from. It comes back to origins, because it's the origin then of right and wrong.
Yeah. And some people have in speaking of making up their own morality, you look at evolution, and what is the morality that comes from evolution? Well, evolution says the strongest survive.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. So it's advantageous then for you or for the best people, the best organisms, whatever, to pass on their genes.
Right.
So the unfit varieties of whatever living thing should really be gotten rid of. They should die out.
Less fit, yeah. And of course that's been applied to societies. That's what we're going to talk about in this article called The Darwinian Roots of the Nazi Tree. I've mentioned this to many people, making this connection before, and they get it after you talk about it, but it's surprising about how many people don't make the link between what happened at the Holocaust and the concept of social Darwinism before you really have the conversation. So I think articles like this are quite powerful. It's by Dr. Jonathan Sarfati. He starts off and says, how could the horrors of the Holocaust occur in the most civilized country in the world? I remember as a kid, when, hearing about, World War II and things that had gone on, during the Holocaust. And I remember thinking to myself, like, whoever the Nazis were, and I understood even as a child, there's a difference between, somebody that was a Nazi and just the average German citizen or whatever,
sure.
Right?
Yes.
But I almost was thinking to myself, like, they must have been different. They must have been evil. There must have been something really strange about them for them to be able to commit such atrocities. What made them able to seem just to be able to do stuff like that where other people couldn't? But I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, he says, the sheer enormity of the killings required a huge network of people. So how could so many commit such atrocities? Richard Weikart, professor of modern European history at California State University, has thoroughly documented the Darwinian roots of many aspects of the Nazi terror in his recent book, From Darwin to Hitler, Evolutionary Ethics, Eugenics, and Racism in Germany. He showed that Darwinism provided many of the foundations for Nazi principles. For example, Darwinism undermined the uniqueness of humanity, which in turn undermined the sanctity of innocent life. This by itself is a slippery slope. Once society starts down this path of regarding any class of humans as not worthy of life, it is hard to stop this extending to other classes because the door is already unlocked. And that makes sense. You're basically saying now, like, well, who exactly is human, who isn't human? Or who's less human? Or who's more human, right? You start classifying people groups by their worthiness and their fitness, their whether they deserve to live or die or not. And then you got to decide, well, who gets to make that decision? Who's in authority to make the decision of this person's more worthy than that? So this is this,
and it's a slippery slope as well, because then, well, why should humans have rights over animals, like apes, for example, or worms? Or grass.
Yeah, I guess because we're more fit than them. If we can wipe them out and they can't wipe us out, then you start.
We have lawnmowers and they don't.
And grass doesn't.
Yes.
Darwinism also undermined a divine foundation for ethics and morality. No moral relativism replaced traditional moral so moral relativism replaced traditional moral codes. Instead, the notion of evolutionary progress became the highest good, overlooking the contradiction that notions of goodness are meaningless when morals become relative. So Christian ideas of compassion for the sick and handicapped were dismissed as weak. They were replaced by notions of the strong dominating the weak, even claiming that it was kind to eliminate the weak. See, now you're starting to justify it. You're starting to say, well, actually, it's better if we get rid of these people because it's actually better for them. It's better for us, too, because now we don't have to look after them. You know, these types of concepts where we see that in our modern societies, because some people say, well, that was history. It'll never happen again. But interesting in countries in Europe where they introduce, you know, things like assisted suicide for the elderly, within a very short period of time, they now have to put laws on the books to convince, to make it so young people aren't trying to convince their parents to kill themselves. You know, well, you know, you're being kicking around for a while here, and you're not doing so well, you know, and you're using up all the money on your healthcare program. So why don't you just sign the paper? You know, these are actually situations that have happened, right?
What a mess.
The notion of evolutionary fitness was not only applied to individuals but groups. Weikart points out that pre-Darwinian racist ideas were usually repulsed by the dominant Christian worldview that all people came from Adam and Eve. But the German Darwinian racists dismissed the darker races as being closer to the apes than the superior, lighter humans. This had horrifying consequences in the Herero genocide in Africa in the early 1900s. The line from Darwin to Hitler was not straightforward because it was so highly branched. Weikart shows that Darwin's ideas became enormously popular in educated German circles, largely through the writings of Ernst Haeckel, of forged embryo drawing infamy. Haeckel, in turn, strongly influenced Alfred Plotz, the founder of the German Society for Race Hygiene, the world's first eugenics organization. This organization included Julius Lehmann as a leading member. He was a racist eugenist and major publisher of medical and scientific textbooks, and had extensive contact with Hitler from 1920. These ideas were not only widespread in elite academic circles, they had filtered down into the Viennese press during Hitler's pre-World War I days. After Hitler's rise, Nazi propaganda spread these ideas still further to the masses. One film, Victim of the Past, showed a disfigured, handicapped person and declared, "Everything in the natural world that is weak for life will ineluctably, unavoidably be destroyed. In the last few decades, mankind has sinned terribly against the law of natural selection. We haven't just maintained life unworthy of life, we have even allowed it to multiply. The descendants of these sick people look like this." I have seen that piece of video footage, and it is chilling.
Yeah.
Because everything I've had Darwin, you know, sometimes you talk to an evolutionist, no, you guys trying to make this connection, and that's not what Darwin believed, and all this kind of stuff. Wait a sec. History has shown that these are logical conclusions from what Darwin's theory taught. Social Darwinism. I mean, I've read large portions of Mein Kampf, and Hitler was a fanatical Darwinist. He just took these concepts and applied it to the society. The evidence is there. Right? You can try to downplay it all you want, but
well, and not just in history, but you can reason it through today.
Right.
Get rid of God, get rid of the Bible, and say, okay, we got here through a process of evolution, survival of the fittest, the extinction of billions and billions of unfit varieties of animals led to people.
Dun-dun-dun. Yep.
And so let's continue that process. Let's get rid of the unfit varieties within people, within every group of living things, and presto, we can advance our evolution.
Exactly.
You can, as an evolutionist, you can reason that way today.
Right. Now, if you want to say, no, we don't want to do that because it's not moral, well, that's just some arbitrary moral standard you've picked. It doesn't naturally fall out of
that
what
morality
this says.
doesn't come from evolution.
Right. He finishes and says, sadly today, the very philosophy that was foundational to Nazism is taught as fact in Western media and educational circles, and atheistic philosophers such as Peter Singer and James Rachels have applied the same reasoning as the Nazis. That Darwinism has undermined the sanctity of human life, so evolutionary euthanasia should be allowed, e.g. for disabled newborns. This shows that if we don't learn from history, we're likely to repeat it. Check out more of these articles on our website, creation.com.